All right, welcome to Critical Weight Theory and another show within a show sort of episode that I call Reply To. It's part of that series where I respond to YouTube video comments. The things that people say about my videos in their comments sections. So, all right, this time it's a comment on my video titled The Violence That Came Home to England. And I've done a few videos recently about the topic of England. And this comment was by John Smith, and he or possibly she, I don't know, obviously the actual sex or gender of the person, but anyway, the quote here is, and the worst offender is America, the genocide of the Native American Indians, the slaves and apartheid still apparent in the 1960s, the illegal wars in the Middle East and the Far East costing millions of lives, the corruption and organized crime, the racism and assassinations carried out even against their own leaders, the gun toting thugs and school shootings, and their boastings of being the best country in the world. So that's not actually a comment that I disagree with. I mean, I actually pretty much agree with everything there. And in a way, my response here is then going to be about how to deal with comments like this. It's sort of like a how to guide, I guess, because it's not like I disagree with what is being said, but it's still not entirely 100% relevant to my video, which was, again, about England. I guess a complicating factor is pretty obvious, though. The rich and well connected who plot atrocities actually do act without much regard to borders, and often they act with impunity. So, in an odd sort of roundabout way, the point about America is still relevant because all of these powerful countries they can team up in these sorts of endeavors, and they don't necessarily need to worry about borders as much as ordinary people. I guess borders and laws are more for poor people to follow, not the fine rich folks who get to tell everyone else what to do. Still, technically, yes, my video was more about Britain or England or nowadays the UK, as they so often wish to be called. So, technically, the comment is still a little bit irrelevant. So, when someone leaves a comment like that, even though I might agree with the general thrust of what is being said, they're still usually not trying to have a careful discussion. They're sort of venting. So, if you get a comment like that, your response it should do a few things. You should stay calm, avoid getting pulled into a country versus country sort of fight, and to the extent necessary, you can bring the focus back to your actual video. So, since my video is titled The Violence That Came Home to England, the key, if I wanted to actually engage with this person, is to redirect the conversation without dismissing what they're saying outright, especially when, like I said, I agree with the sentiment anyway. So, I'm not trying to make a disagreement where there actually isn't one. So there are a few options you could use in response, depending on the tone that you want to go with. I think you might want to be like a little bit calm and redirecting. There's no doubt that the US has a long and gross history, including serious injustices and violence. My video isn't about comparing countries or ranking who is worse, though. It's about looking at how violence shapes or shaped events in England and how it affected people there, more about here in the United States. And I'm trying to keep that focus on that specific historical context in that video, especially when I spent so much time already, focusing on American politics. I thought it was kind of refreshing to get a clean break from that. And at least occasionally, I will look at the politics of other countries. Not that I'm an expert on their political systems or even an expert on the system that I live in, Sometimes I like it as an excuse to do a little bit of research, to actually look into more about the history of their countries and their political systems, get some insights into the unique aspects of how their systems work and whatnot. And that's one reason by itself to sometimes do a video like that. And of course, there are also the abilities that we all have to compare and contrast. So it's not like that's totally illegitimate to do that, but it can be a little distractive. So, I want to be sort of neutral and avoid escalating into that debate over which country is worse. And, every country has chapters in its history that are difficult and controversial and outright criminal, including the US and the UK. And those videos focus specifically on England and the consequences of violence within that setting. So if people are interested, I'm open to discussing other historical contexts, but maybe in separate videos, If we want to do if we want to actually do a video about which country is the worst, then okay, maybe I could actually do that video. Maybe that's what this episode will end up becoming. So, I'm not trying to dismiss their pivot or their point, but I'm not wanting it to derail the topic either. So it would be nice to get some people to actually talk about what was happening in England at the time. So again, the video isn't about the US, and it's not a competition over which country has done more harm. It's about a specific historical uh, set of issues in England. So let's try to keep the discussion focused more on that. And I'm not trying to add fuel to any fires here. It's sort of like a general tip. So I'm not trying to win some argument. I'm not trying to fact check every claim you know, unless maybe, there is some erroneous claim being made there, but I don't think there was. And really, this isn't exactly a debate podcast or YouTube channel anyway. I've made a decision that I'm going to largely avoid the debate bro sort of space, because a lot of people there, they get in there and they are more about applying cynical and divisive tactics, and that's not really what I'm about so much. I can be divisive, don't get me wrong, but the problem with debates is you could technically win a debate and come out looking like a winner, yet still be on the wrong side factually or ethically or otherwise. It's not really the most honest way to approach issues when when it comes to debate tactics. It becomes more like an entertainment thing than actually getting to the heart of issues or anything like that. So, I'm it's not like I totally avoid sarcasm, and I'm sure some of the topics and my opinions will invite escalation. But when it comes to doing this comparison and contrasting between different countries, I think it I think it ends up sometimes not being that great of a thing to do. It can end up turning things hostile and lead to some disengagement or something like that. So I think my audience is going to judge me sometimes either way, like regardless of what I say or do, because that's just how people are. But my tone and my position here is, I'm trying to stay measured, even though there will always be some people who don't find me to be credible, and that's just the nature of the internet. You could have the best arguments of all time, you could have all the evidence on your side, and somebody out there will still disagree with whatever you're trying to say. So I think with that in mind, it can be complicated enough to engage in political themed videos. I don't really need further complications by lumping all these other countries in to a video that's about a specific country. You know what I mean? Like it's already rough enough to engage in political thought without all these different countries and histories being piled on to one topic that was already kind of heavy as a topic. And well, that's about it for this. I guess video. I think I addressed the issue well enough. It's not like I have a strong disagreement with the premise. I just, wish the comments had been more about England because that's what the video was about.